What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for Thursday night football between the Eagles and the Texans. This is for FanDuel, and I'm setting this up for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. Some of the steps I'll be taking here I would not be taking if I were playing cash games or smaller field GPPs. This is for the largest field GPPs, how I'm going to be setting up my fantasy cruncher. First thing I'm going to do is change the way my columns look here just so I can see what I want to see in the middle of the screen. I have a quick view saved with my ownership projection, the Stokastic ownership projection, how much I'm getting to a player after I have run a crunch, exposure caps, etc., in the middle of the screen. And I'm actually going to start this by running a crunch to see, using the Stokastic projections, what kind of salary is used by the top projected lineups. So the top projected lineups for Thursday Night Football currently mostly use close to the salary cap. This one's leaving $1,500 on the table. Several of them are using the full salary cap or just $500 off. Gives you an idea of how much salary you can leave on the table or you need to leave on the table to get different. I will note this could change pretty drastically if Brandon Cooks does not play tomorrow. I'm making this video on Wednesday night, by the way. That's why I'm referring to Thursday Night Football as tomorrow. This won't come out until Thursday, but I'm making it Wednesday night. Don't know, as I'm making this video, what the status of Brandon Cooks will be. My guess is he's not going to be playing, in which case some of the other wide receivers on Houston are going to project much better, and maybe the optimal lineups are going to use less salary than the full salary cap, and you might need to leave a little bit more salary on the table, or you might be comfortable leaving more salary on the table, but we'll have to see what happens tomorrow. One thing I'm going to do right away is I'm going to go into the MVP spot and set a cap on my exposure to players in the MVP spot specifically. I'm going to set this cap at 20%. And then I'm going to look in the tools at FanDuel. We have Jalen Hurts in the optimal in the captain spot 28% of the time. So maybe I could set this a little bit higher. We had him projected for 28% ownership, 28% optimal. You could think about full fading Jalen Hurts. You could think about playing 100% Jalen Hurts. I think that it's a spot where he is likelier than a lot of players are to be the optimal MVP. I guess we can see 28% is a pretty high number, but it's not like he's 40, 50%. So it's up to you what you want to do with Jalen Hurts. Maybe I'll change this from 20% and allow Fantasy Cruncher to give me up to 30% Jalen Hurts in the MVP spot. I do think it's pretty likely that he ends up being the highest scoring player on the slate. But we do have a few other viable potential MVPs and AJ Brown, Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. We have a number of guys who could end up in that spot. I skipped right over Davis Mills. Davis Mills is probably in that conversation as well. He could be the highest scoring player on this slate. But all right, I'm going to go into the advanced options. I'm going to work in two tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting here in the general tab, unique players per lineup, I'm leaving at one unique player per lineup. That means I can have lineups that are just one player away from each other in my lineup set. That's generally what I recommend. I'm playing 150 lineups. That's what I recommend for 150 lineups. If you're only playing like 20 lineups or fewer, I might recommend using two unique players per lineup instead. But since I'm making 150, I'm going to leave that at one. Team salary, I don't set a minimum. I do set a maximum for the purpose of avoiding being duplicated. If I am lucky enough to win a slate, everything goes perfectly for me. My lineup wins. Hooray. I don't want to win $2,000. I want to win, $20,000, $40,000, $100,000. And the best way to do that is the only way to do that is to avoid being duplicated. One way to avoid being duplicated is to leave salary on the table. So that's what I'm going to do for the purpose of this video. I'm going to leave $1,500 on the table. I think that seems like a reasonable amount for this slate to avoid some of the most duplicated lineups. Offensive players versus defense, we currently have set to the default, which is max 2. I'm going to change that to 4. So theoretically, I could have a lineup with 4 players from one team against just the defense from the other team. We just saw that win in the Browns-Bengals game. We saw 4 Browns players and the Bengals defense were in the optimal. It can happen. People don't want to play those lineups. It tends to go underrepresented. It's certainly a decent enough lineup that not a lot of people are going to do. So I don't mind having 4 offensive players against the defense from the opposing team. Global exposure cap, I'm leaving at 100%. As you saw, I did set the cap differently in the MVP spot specifically. Randomness, I am going to use 50%. If you want a little bit more control over your lineups, you could set this number lower, maybe 10%, or just not use randomness at all if you want complete control over your lineups. Or if you're using classic randomness, so you don't have Fantasy Cruncher Pro, you could be using classic randomness. I might recommend using, 30 or 40% randomness instead of 50%. Minimum projection included in calculation, the default is set to 3. I'm going to leave that at 3. If I want a player to be in my player pool and they currently project for fewer than 3 fantasy points, I'm just going to give them a manual boost to their projection to make sure that it's above 3 fantasy points so that they will be in my player pool. And then players from each team max, I'm going to leave that at 4 so I can have 4 players from one team against the defense or against just one player from the other team. Hey guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. All right, and I'm going to go to the groups tab and make a couple groups here, starting with Jalen Hurts MVP group. I'm going to make Jalen Hurts in the MVP spot my key player. And I'm going to go through and add every Eagles pass catcher to a secondary group. Actually, not going to include running back because they just do not receive the ball enough. From Jalen Hurts, I'm only going to apply plus minus adjustments. Because Jalen Hurts has so much rushing upside, I think that it is plausible for Jalen Hurts to be the optimal MVP without bringing along any of his pass catchers. So I'm just going to be giving these guys boosts. I'm not actually going to be requiring them in my lineups. I'm going to give all these players full boosts, I think. I didn't on DraftKings because I think AJ Brown and Devontae Smith projected so well point per dollar that I wasn't concerned about getting them that I was concerned about getting them in every lineup if I gave them a full boost. But on FanDuel, it doesn't look like these guys project quite as well point per dollar as they did on DraftKings. So for now, I think I'm okay giving them full boost. So when I say full boost, in this case, I just mean 12%. It's a random number that I chose, after working a little while to just kind of figure out what do I need to give the boost to get to amounts that I like of different players. I landed on 12 being kind of my starting point, and then I go back and adjust if I need to get more of certain players or less of other players. I think that a 12% boost tends to get me close to where I want to be, and then I can adjust from there. So this is my Hurts MVP lineup. Davis Mills, a very different situation than Jalen Hurts. Davis Mills is a statue. I believe he has 10 rushing yards so far this year. So I'm going to go ahead and make a different group for Davis Mills in the MVP spot. I'm going to make him my key player. And then I'm going to add every Texans pass catcher to a secondary group. And again, I'm making this on Wednesday night. I don't know at the time that I'm making this whether Brandon Cooks is going to be playing on Thursday Night Football. Things could change pretty drastically from what we have here. These projections all assume Brandon Cooks is in. But for the purpose of these videos, I'm not making player decisions. I don't really need to know who's going to be in, who's going to be out. I'm adding everybody with a projection who's relevant and who's going to be involved in the passing game. And for the Texans, that does include running backs. Both Dameon Pierce and Rex Burkhead have been much more involved in the passing game than any Eagles pass catcher. I'm actually going to remove Agumbawale and Hairston for now. No, I'm not. I'm going to leave them in just in case we do get news tomorrow. Maybe something goes weird and Dameon Pierce is out. Maybe those guys become relevant. So I'm going to leave them in the group. I tend to be a little bit liberal in how much I leave. how many players I leave in these groups. I can always, remove them later if I need to, but it doesn't hurt to have them in the groups. They don't really make much of a difference. For Davis Mills in the MVP spot, I'm not going to click this only apply plus minus adjustments button. I want to have at least one pass catcher in a flex spot when I have Davis Mills in the MVP spot. It's just so unlikely that he puts up enough fantasy points to be in the MVP spot without bringing along one of his pass catchers, because Davis Mills, again, has virtually zero rushing upside. Of course, any quarterback could rush it in from the 1 yard line. Flukes happen all the time in the NFL. It's plausible, but most likely if Davis Mills is optimal in the MVP spot, he's scoring more than just one touchdown. He's, scoring multiple touchdowns, and it's probably not very likely that he scores multiple rushing touchdowns. He's probably scoring at least one touchdown through the air if he is the optimal MVP. And if he does, he's probably bringing along one of these pass catchers, and very likely multiple pass catchers if he really puts up enough fantasy points to be in the MVP spot, which feels unlikely to me, but it's football. Stuff happens. So it is possible. I'm not going to require two. I'm only requiring one in lineups with Mills in the MVP spot, but I am going to give boost to all of these pass catchers as well, to make it more likely that if I have Davis Mills in the MVP spot, I get multiple Texans pass catchers in flex spots. Running backs, probably not going to give quite the full boost. Don't think I'm going to give any boost to Dameon Pierce just because he's already the highest projected player from the Texans. So I'm a little bit concerned that I'm going to have a lot of lineups that have, like, all of my Davis Mills MVP lineups have just Dameon Pierce in them because I'm only requiring one. So I don't want to give him too much of a boost, if at all. So I'm just going to leave him as is, along with these other running backs. Rex Burkhead, I think, is involved enough in the passing game and projects low enough that I want to give him a boost in lineups that have Mills in the MVP spot. I'm actually going to give him a bigger boost. Okay, there we go. I think that's pretty good. And then my final group that I'm going to make, I am going to make a Mills flex group. So I'm going to go find Mills in the flex spot, make him my key player, and then add every Texans pass catcher to a secondary group. And for this group, I'm also going to include those players in the MVP spot because I don't have Mills in that MVP spot, so he can be paired with his pass catchers in the MVP spot. There's so many. None of them project all that well, but so many different pass catching options for the Texans. Again, if Cooks is out, that'll probably change a little bit. All of those projections are going to go up a little bit, and maybe some significantly. So that'll be interesting. I am not going to give any boost here. I'm just going to require, I think, man, I'm contemplating now whether I want to require having a pass catcher in Davis Mills lineups where he is in the flex spot. It can happen more likely on FanDuel than DraftKings that the quarterback gets there without bringing it along a pass catcher, just because there's no full PPR, there's no bonuses for like 100 yards. So it is more likely for a quarterback to be optimal in a lineup in the flex spot without bringing along a pass catcher than it is on DraftKings. But at that price tag, I don't know that it's all that likely for a quarterback that has like zero rushing upside. So maybe I am. So the question here is whether I click this button and then give boost to all of these players, or just leave it as is, requiring at least one pass catcher. I think I'm just going to require at least one pass catcher, even though it is possible for Davis Mills to get into the optimal without bringing somebody along. It feels pretty unlikely. So I'm just going to leave it as is and require a pass catcher in every Davis Mills lineup. All right. Hey guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. And now I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups, see what they look like. All right, right away we see Jalen Hurts with multiple pass catchers. If you include Miles Sanders and his 13 targets this year as a pass catcher, multiple pass catchers for Jalen Hurts looks good. Jalen Hurts with 0 pass catchers in the flex. Again, I think that's totally fine. Jalen Hurts can do enough on the ground that he doesn't bring along any pass catchers, and he can still be in the optimal lineup. So I'm okay with that lineup. Goddard with Hurts correlation, Mills with more correlation. This lineup looks good. Devontae Smith with Hurts and Goddard. Cooks and Moore with no Mills. I don't really mind that. We do still have half PPR, so that's fine to have a couple pass catchers without the quarterback. Hurts with multiple pass catching options. AJ Brown and MVP with Hurts and the Eagles defense and Jake Elliott. Just Chris Moore from the Texans. I like that lineup. In general, I think these are looking good. Don't know that I love this lineup. Hurts with Sanders. I guess they don't really need to be that correlated. They could each just score touchdowns on the ground. Yeah, I'm okay with that totally. Mills with Moore, Hurts with Goddard and Elliott. Elliott's not really, obviously not a pass catching option, but that correlation looks fine to me. Hurts with no pass catchers here. I'm okay with it. We've got Davis Mills with Moore and Cooks here, so multiple pass catchers. Prefer to see that when I have Davis Mills at MVP, so glad that that's happening. In general, I think all of these lineups look correlated well enough for me. Don't love Mills with just Moore and no other pass catchers, but I do think that it's plausible potentially for Mills to get there and Moore to not outscore him. It's tough, but I think that it is at least within the realm of possibilities. So as long as I don't see a ton of lineups with Mills and just one pass catcher, Mills at the MVP and just one pass catcher in the flex, I think I'm okay with it. I do think that it is within the realm of possibilities. In general, I think I'm okay with these lineups. Once again, I need to note, I think that there's a good chance Brandon Cooks misses tomorrow. I could be totally off base. Maybe there's reasons that he's been missing practice and he'll be just fine come game time. But I think that there is some possibility that he is not active tomorrow. So things could change drastically. Man, only getting to 11% Davis Mills in the flex spot, 8% in the captain spot. Interesting. Do I want more than that of Davis Mills? I'm not totally sure whether I do or not. I probably want more than 11%. So maybe I'd go and in this phase. So I look at my lineups. I made sure that they're all correlated well enough. I think that they are. So now I just go through and look position by position. How much am I getting of players? How much do I want? Do I want to make adjustments? Davis Mills, I might go and say, I'm going to give him a thumbs up in the flex spot. Maybe I want more than 11%. Jalen Hurts looks like I'm going to get 97% currently. Maybe I don't want quite 97%. I don't know that I want to give a full. We'll see. I'm going to give him the thumbs down and see what happens. That might be a little bit too much, but we'll see. Dameon Pierce not getting much at all, just 9%. Maybe I want more than that of Dameon Pierce. Give him a thumbs up. Rex Burkhead only getting 4%. I'll give him a thumbs up. Boston Scott, I think on FanDuel, I often love these kind of guys. Boston Scott, Kenneth Gainwell, getting virtually zero ownership, both coming in at under 4% owned. And I think that both of these guys are live to score a touchdown. And if you score a touchdown on FanDuel, there's a good chance you end up optimal. It's not guaranteed, but on FanDuel with no PPR, it's just half PPR, makes it a lot more likely that just one touchdown is going to be enough to get you into the optimal lineup. So I tend to like these guys that are, certainly will have a path to just scoring a touchdown, getting to 10, 11, 12 fantasy points and aren't going to get a lot of ownership. These guys certainly interest me. So I'm going to give some thumbs up there. And then these guys don't project well enough currently to get into my lineups. I think I'm okay with that. I'm not going to force them in. Again, I'm not making lineup decisions right now, though. I'm going to be digging in tomorrow as I write an article about this slate. I'm going to be digging into the numbers and deciding then whether I want to be getting these guys into my player pool by giving them projections of 3 or more. For now, I'm going to leave them out. Not getting much AJ Brown at all. Maybe I want a little bit more AJ Brown. Devontae Smith. Again, these guys, these secondary, tertiary Texans pass catching options, I think If Brandon Cooks is out, I don't need to say I think their projections will be going up, and I'll be getting to more of them naturally. Their ownership projections will also be going up. So I'm going to keep doing this under the assumption that Brandon Cooks is in. If he is, I'd probably want more Brandon Cooks than 18%, but I probably also want more Philip Dorsett. Chris Moore, the second. I'm getting to 62% Chris Moore. Now, he is now the number 2 receiver for the Texans, and he's only 6,500. So it makes sense that he projects really well, point per dollar. But still, I don't know that I want 62% Chris Moore. I think certainly 2 catches for 12 yards is within his range of outcomes. So I probably want less than 62%. Maybe I'd rather take some more shots on Quez Watkins. Maybe I want Tyron Johnson in my player pool. Just give him the 3 fantasy point, get him into my player pool. Tight end, getting to a lot of Dallas Goedert, not getting to much Jordan Akins, getting to more Brevin Jordan. Maybe I'll give a little bit of a boost to Jordan Akins, get a little bit more there. Maybe I want OJ Howard to be in my player pool. He's only 6,000. Maybe I'll give him a little fantasy point boost, make sure that he is in my player pool. Jack Stoll. Again, haven't really done the research yet to decide who I want in my lineups, but I'm just setting up, kind of showing you the general thought process and how I approach these slates. Getting to a good amount of Eagles at 10,000, not getting to a lot of Texans. Maybe I want more than 1% of Texans. Maybe not. Maybe you want 0% of Texans. I think that would be probably a fine decision too, but I'm going to give a boost to the Texans, maybe get a little bit more, and then crunch out again. And that boost is not enough. Now I get 0 Texans because I gave bigger boosts elsewhere. I'm going to crunch again. All right, still not getting too much Texans. One more boost. All right, 2.7% Texans. Still not getting to a ton. It might be fine. The projection is clearly not great. If I need to get more, if I want to get more than this 2.7%, there are no more thumbs up to give. So I would need to just go in and manually give a little boost to this projection. Maybe you want more of Fairbairn than 4% relative to Jake Elliott's 47%, in which case I would give Fairbairn, a couple thumbs up. Every thumbs up you give, again, boost the projection by 8%. I don't really want 18% Jack Stoll necessarily. Maybe I do. I haven't decided this yet, but that's a lot of Jack Stoll just by giving him the minimum projection. Maybe I need to change some other players relative to him. I'm not going to go ahead and do all that right now, though. Jordan Akins still not getting any. Maybe give him more thumbs up. This is just my general approach. I go position by position, looking at different players, looking at what their projections are relative to each other, and what I need to do to get to closer to exposure levels of each player that I like. And what I'm looking at is ownership projections, and then we have the single game tool under the FanDuel tab. You can see projected ownership in the captain spot, how often they're optimal in the Stokastic sims, and then same thing the utility spot, projected ownership in the flex spot, and then how often they are optimal in the flex spot. And that helps guide my decisions of how much I want of different players. But I'm not going to go through all of that right now, just showing you my general process. And that's about it. I just make sure my lineups that my player exposures are about what I want them to be, and that my lineups are correlated the way I want them to be correlated, so that they look like they have a chance to win, so that I don't have like Davis Mills in the MVP spot with no Texans pass catchers. Without being a rushing quarterback, there's just virtually zero path for that to work out. Obviously, flukes can happen. He could somehow have a weird receiving touchdown and score fantasy points in other ways, but it's just so likely that Davis Mills puts up enough fantasy points to be the optimal MVP without throwing a lot and bringing along some pass catcher with him. So I don't want to see any lineups with Davis Mills in the MVP spot. As you saw, I grouped that out. I made sure that was not possible. And in general, if I have Davis Mills in the MVP spot, I want multiple pass catchers, because if he's throwing it too much to one pass catcher, that pass catcher is going to be outscoring him. Again, I didn't require it, but more often that's what I would like to see. Whereas Jalen Hurts has so much rushing upside, you don't necessarily need multiple pass catchers or even a single pass catcher in lineups that have Jalen Hurts. again, just because he gets so many fantasy points on the ground. So these lineups all correlate well enough. I've got no issue with these lineups. I left a little salary on the table, so they're not going to be duplicated a ton. And I haven't finished doing it, but I will go through position by position until I get to exposure levels that I like for every player. It might not be perfect, but within the range that I want to have from each player. So anyway, that is my general process. This is what I'm going to be working on tomorrow for this game between the Eagles and Texans. Hope you can find some success using this or a similar process. Good luck.